Good evening. If you could get seated, we're about to start. Our special guest this evening is Mrs. Smriti Irani, Union Minister for Textiles, and no stranger to many of you. She's one of India's most charismatic and sorry, not working. One of India's most charismatic and articulate politicians, and I think the youngest minister in the cabinet. Before she embarked on a political career, she was one of India's best-known television stars. Many politicians become well-known in the media after they join politics. But here we have somebody who actually came into politics with a great reputation and great recognition. In fact, we realized this in a very strange manner earlier this year when at the Observer Research Foundation we organized the Raisena dialogue with the Ministry of External Affairs. Smriti ji had come on to speak on women in the New World Order, and as is characteristic of her, she spoke very well. She made her points, she answered questions. As her session got over, there was something strange that happened that doesn't usually happen at conferences and think tank events. There was a rush of people in her direction, and almost all of them were from Afghanistan. So there were former generals, former ministers, current politicians, diplomats, activists, all from Afghanistan. There were a dozen of them. And they ran up to her with phones came out, selfies were being taken. So it left many of us completely astounded. And then one of them explained to me that Smriti Irani and her TV programs were so popular in Afghanistan that apparently while they were being telecast, the civil war stopped. Both sides, the Northern Alliance and the Taliban, stopped to watch this Indian actress and then went back to killing each other. So that was my first, not first, but one of my early indications of just how much he has contributed to Indian soft power and diplomacy. So let me start, Smriti ji, by going straight into the questions. We've just seen that the NDA government, led by Prime Minister Modi, complete 3 years. If you were to sum up for this very diverse and international audience, the 3 or 4 standout achievements of these 3 years, what would you say they were?
I think the possibility that somebody born in a small village, coming from very humble origins, not shy about a political destination or a political milestone that they wanted to be within grasping reach of, the in-your-face politics was a bit new for New Delhi and many people who were stalwarts in Indian politics. So when there was an announcement in Goa that Narendra Modi will be the prime ministerial candidate of the Bharatiya Janata Party, many were taken aback. In fact, many foo-fooed the whole idea and said, "Ye kabhi nahi hone wala." But somewhere people did not understand that this was a surge which was coming right down from the grassroots. This is a country which for too long had a political class and a specific political family identified with power, which told the general public, we are deigned to rule, we are deigned to administer, and you're now subscribed to follow. This is a country which had a humongous population base of young voters below the age of 35, which witnessed an era which said, "Pata hai mera baap kaun hai?" Onwards to a young population which says, it does not matter what is your lineage. What matters is what is new that you bring to the table, how competitive you are, what kind of talent you have. And I think that is what propelled Mr. Modi into office, because he told people, I will give you an enabling environment and give you an opportunity so that you can leverage your talent, your hard work, and make something yourselves in your life. One of the biggest things, I think, that was detrimental in keeping a lot of people back was that so many people in our country never saw the insides of a bank. And the Jan Dhan Yojana which started, for many it was something which was not very unique. They said, "Kya hai? Bank ka khata hi to hai." But for people who had never gone into a bank, who had never had an RTGS transaction, who had not had DBT benefits and subsidies directly put into their bank accounts, this was something absolutely new. So in 60 years of independence, suddenly you had 28 crore citizens saying that now I am connected to the Indian treasury myself because I have a Jan Dhan Yojana. The second issue was something called the Mudra Yojana. So if you look at the larger base in our country, if you're born in a lower middle class family, and many of us have seen those days, you are normally preordained to get a good job, and you're always told by your parents that stick to that job because that is your lifeline. And the rest of your life goes to do anything and everything, keep a good job. Now, this entire atmosphere of some youngster wanting to do something of their own, wanting that kind of capital, not getting it because you needed a collateral, saw a big change when Mudra Yojana came because there are people with small desires, small dreams, small goals, and they said, it would suffice if I get a loan of 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh maximum. And Mudra Yojana gave you that big ambit from 50,000 onwards to 10 lakh. But what was unique about the success of Mudra Yojana, and I proudly as a woman talk about it on every platform, is that 70% of the beneficiaries are women. 7.9 crore people in this country received that loan, out of which 70% women. That means a very simple Indian woman has gone to a bank, drawn up her papers, convinced the manager that this is my business plan and I'll pay you back. And the manager, that is huge. Ordinary Indian woman has managed to do that. So for me, these 3 years are a journey where we've given people an opportunity to leverage their own talent, their own hard work, and make something of themselves. And the very fact for the Mudra Yojana to have 70% beneficiaries as women, for me, is talking about that very soft underbelly of power of women, which is never spoken about. That's the big story, that's the big takeaway.
To carry on that jobs and the Mudra theme, grassroots entrepreneurship, as the Prime Minister has often said, he wants to create a society of job givers or job creators rather than job seekers. In a sense, it's also a recognition that modern technology, the fourth industrial revolution and robotics are cutting into formal jobs, and we have to look for a new method. You are in charge of the Textiles Ministry, which is one of India's standout industries, also a huge employer. How are you balancing this challenge of creating jobs and of driving Indian textiles into a new era?
I think our opportunities are aplenty. We have the largest amount of cotton production in our country, the largest amount of jute production in our country. Our challenge is how do we diversify? Our challenge is how do we become more productive given our circumstances? Do we say no to automation completely because we have a large labor base? Or do we say that, okay, totally automation when your own society is not prepared for it because of the fear of job loss? So that's a very delicate tightrope that you have to walk. But look at the legacy of problems. So when you look at the problems, people normally talk about, let's say, 5 years ago, this is what happened in UPA. Let me take you back a little in terms of silk. Now, when I went to Bangalore, and there's a central silk board that works in terms of research and the entire silk production in the country, they said the last time a new race of silkworms was introduced in our country was in the 1960s, 70s. That means my legacy problem is not just 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's
50 years ago.
50 years ago. Now, if you look at the last 5 years, out of which the last 4 years of the UPA2 rule, I saw that out of 40 schemes of the Textile Ministry, 22 were completely surrendered without a single paisa being spent. Which means an industry which is the second largest employer in the country after agriculture, it's not that there was dearth of money. It is just that there was a dearth of intention to actually apply yourselves to issues which were right there on the ground. So in a country which has a huge capacity, we are second to China now, let's say, in silk, but what is the gap? The gap is tremendous. So we keep wondering, I am doling out money through the government. Why is this sector just not coming up? That's because the whole crop there is 50 years old. Now let's look at jute, compare it to Bangladesh. In India, when you talk about jute diversification, industry says, मैं कैसे diversify करूँ? How do I diversify? Because the crop that you give me is not good enough for me to diversify and get other products. The only thing I can make out of this crop is gunny bags, which now the government of India buys through FCI. So that means a farmer produces that crop, I can't diversify, so I make sacks because I have a ready customer in Government of India, and that whole circle keeps going round and round. So one calls the farmers and says, what is the problem in production? He says, I don't have certified seeds. Now, what is the problem when one looks at, Kiji, agriculture comes under the state, so one calls the state and says, sir, did you apply for certified seeds? I shall get back to you. Okay, fine. So by the time the state gets back to me, what do? I call my colleague in agriculture ministry and I say, sir, I have a national jute board. Can I please use your good offices, have an MOU with the Seed Corporation of India and between the national jute board so that whoever we can get in touch with, at least we distribute that seed. The problem here is, Ashok, that when you look at bureaucracy, and I think there are many in this audience who can speak better, people work in silos, which is another hallmark of the Modi government. Earlier, you would hear about these, cantankerous little, rumblings of fights between two ministries or two ministers. In this government, at least I can pick up the phone, tell my colleagues in another ministry that that is not my domain to look at farm produce. But this is how industry gets impacted. So can you help me correct that end of the problem so that this end becomes more productive? And that is what we've managed to do in these 3 years.
You've focused a lot electorally in Uttar Pradesh.
Have I?
Well, in the past 2-3 years at least.
Would you like to get specific?
Okay. In specifically Amethi, the Amethi area,
Yeah.
but you have traveled around the state. One of the themes we'll be discussing here is the Sustainable Development Goals, which are essentially challenges in health, education, inclusion, of course, in the Jan Dhan Yojana will be part of that, and sanitation. The most pressing challenge in all of these areas is in Uttar Pradesh, where the BJP has just come to power recently, or in fact, next door in Bihar. Most of us are in the think tank community, we talk in halls like these. We don't actually go to the ground. You have gone to the ground. How pressing and how serious is the challenge? And what is being done to redress it?
I'll give a very, experience that I'd shared once, people with regards to sanitation. So there were these toilets built in one rural area, not in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And women were told that you have these toilet blocks, kindly use them. And suddenly, you saw that people were tying bakris inside, goats inside those toilet blocks. And people went back and they said, why would you, because you needed sanitation facilities, why would you tie a goat inside a newly constructed toilet and make that toilet defunct? So suddenly the person who had actually through that NGO made that toilet, they discovered that women in the morning would actually sit and chatter. So the next toilet they made was a circular one, and it's amazing, where women could look at each other but not see the rest of their body, so they were actually using that. So many issues are not only because of, let's say, a challenge of governance, it's also about a mindset which needs some kind of an engagement for. For instance, you talk about sustainable development goal. Genuinely, if you go down and ask anybody at the local administrative level, can you tell me what is SDG 5? Will they be able to tell you how does a sustainable development goal actually impact your life? Can they enunciate that? Now, those people who are supposed to administer, if they can't articulate that, then how do you expect an implementation or an application of it on the ground? So you talk about a goal ki, for instance, we have a PCPNDT Act. We talk about Kanya Bhrun Hatya nahi karni chahiye. So when we talk about PCPNDT Act, we sit amongst women and welfare departments, that's about it. But the enforcement of the PCPNDT Act will come under the Home Ministry because it's an issue of law and order. How many people go and actually file a complaint? How many of these complaints see the light of day? How many go to court? That becomes an issue. So when you talk about SDGs, it is about how applicable it is to you as an individual, to you as an administrative unit. If people in some way connect to that as human beings, then you see a huge amount of work happening on the ground. Unless that happens, till then it will just be, like you said, conversations in a room. You have to humanize that goal for people.
One of the criticisms of the Modi government in the past 3 years is that despite the very robust mandate won and the majority won in 2014, despite very good intentions, The delivery system, the bureaucratic system which we've had for many years now, it certainly needs to be toned up and changed, if not drastically overhauled. That attempt has not really been made. Would you say that's a fair criticism, an unfair criticism?
To say that that attempt has not been made is, I think, a bit unfair, because attempts have been made at very varied levels. But the issue is that when you expect a degree of competitiveness as compared to the private sector, the difference between the government and the private sector is, in private sector you perform or you perish. In government you perform or you don't perform, but nothing happens to you. In the bureaucracy, I'm sorry, but it doesn't. So you will have to write, let's say I as a minister will have to write, okay, ये officer perform नहीं कर रहा. They can actually go to 2 other departments and say, minister is wrong, ये officer perform कर रहा है. तो politician सोचता है, अरे why should I write ये perform नहीं कर रहा है? Those 2 people are saying ये perform कर रहा है. तो by year 2 you learn कि नहीं जी हाँ perform कर रहा है. ये भी perform कर रहा है, वो भी perform. That is the problem. The second issue is, and everybody knows it, it's like the most well-kept secret in the capital. I mean, no wonder I'm called blunt, but that is the honest truth. The second issue is that those who are performing, who are going out of the way and actually applying themselves, how much does the system allow us to kind of sustain them and bring them up the ladder quickly? That is also a question, but that cannot be addressed by the polity alone. So the polity can provide you that atmosphere where good officers, for instance, if they are good officers, I had many. I wrote genuinely glorious ACRs for them. And you could read my ACR and come to know this gentleman or this lady has genuinely worked on the ground. But the good apples, the bad apples, and the apples who don't care who's good or bad, how do you segregate? So how do you make them more competitive? How do you actually, in some way reward those who have gone out of the line? And how do you genuinely, tell people who don't want to contribute that if you don't want to contribute, kindly allow and make space for your colleagues who are extremely excited about doing this job. But that is not something the polity can only do. That is something that the services have to do for themselves. And to say that the services are not doing it at all is also incorrect. The services are aware. I mean, I've seen that interaction where they come out and they help the minister beyond the call of duty, going beyond that silo. So it's all about who, takes that challenge head on and who kind of applies themselves to a solution in conjunction with all levels of bureaucracy.
Fair enough. We'll now open it up to questions from the audience. We have time for about 4 or 5, I guess. So, yes, Master Pinak Chakravarti. Could the mic be taken to him, please?
Can you hear it? Thank you, ma'am, for being here. I came through the UPSC, joined the Foreign Service, etc., and part of the bureaucracy. One solution that you could try when people are going into the higher management cadre is the system of bidding for posts. That, to put it simply, that there is a joint secretary's vacancy. You open it up for bidding by different services, people who think that they can do a good job in that thing. This system has been tried in many places and it seems to work, but I don't know whether it will work here. But the other thing, of course, is the overall of the domestic civil service, which we have inherited from the British, is now 70 years old. It is, I think, high time that we look into that and not just stick to the old pattern that we have had. And I mean it for all services. But bidding is a thing that one could try.
That's a good suggestion, sir. In fact, a very small example. I'm doing the first ever a textile whole trade fair, conferences, roundtables and everything on the 30th of June in Gandhinagar. Our ambassador of South Korea, I just picked up the phone and I called him and I said, sir, we are not having that kind of an engagement and I want to, go 2 steps forward. He said, I have never had a minister call me directly, firstly. I said, it doesn't matter, I have little time, but I need help. That gentleman from, crossing the T's onwards to who will come where, who will go how, who will get represented, he just led the whole thing for us. Today, that national delegation is coming to Gandhinagar. Only possible in 10 days because the ambassador said, you called me, so let me finish. That's why I say it's not something polity can do alone or bureaucrats can do alone. It takes, after all, a politician to pick up the phone and say, can you do this and help? And they're more than willing to help. So bidding is, again, something which will not, this is the DOPT which will look into all those aspects. But I will only say this, that I have had experiences where today I'm not in HRD, but if some kid needs help somewhere, every bureaucrat that I've worked with, I can just pick up a phone call and I say, this kid is in trouble, can you please help? And they do come forward. So it's a two-way street. You have to build that confidence in officers as well.
Yes, General.
Can I give the mic here first and then I'll take it to others?
Yeah, sure. Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't see her. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister, for your presentation. Taking off from where, I'm from Chennai, by the way. Taking off from where the earlier speaker gave his view. We have in this country rich resources of people who are experts in their fields. And it's rather sad that we have to confine ourselves to think tanks and writings, which nobody reads, by the way, or even if they read, it doesn't matter. But there is no lateral entry system. Now, I think that's a pity, because as I said, there are a lot of people who are experts in a lot of, in human resources, we are very rich. In intellectual resources, we are very rich. And every time somebody goes and makes it abroad, then we make a big hoo-ha about it. But we have many, many such people here. And we don't seem to, take them on and allow them to be part of the governing system in this country. That was just a suggestion that I had to make.
Ma'am, I have one, possibly a little bit of a different view. I think to contribute to your country's growth, you need not only be a part of the political system or the bureaucratic system. This fallacy that I can be very constructively a contributor only if I'm a part of these two pillars of our country's overall governance system, I think is a bit, I differ on that view, because I have seen general citizens who have nothing to do even with think tanks. And by the way, don't think nobody reads. Everybody's reading, but nobody might want to talk about it. That's another issue. Everybody's reading everything. I think that the beauty of this country is that there are many people who do not wait for a call to service, either in the bureaucracy or the armed forces or in Indian polity. You look at education, for instance. There are many people, education, agriculture, industry, people who just helped each other, wanted to go contribute back to their villages, their small towns, and they got a lot of things done in this country. And insofar as only when someone goes overseas and they, get that little halo on their head, partially I would agree, it does happen. There is, after all, a Hindi proverb, ghar ki kheti, ghar ki murgi dal barabar. So I would not say that it is wrong in, in any sense. Partially it is right. But I guess that challenge happens in almost every field, in almost every society, in every community. To say it's only an Indian problem would be incorrect. It happens everywhere. But to say that you can only effectively contribute if only you are in bureaucracy, I don't think so. I've seen average Indians do much more.
But let me ask a follow-up question. If you look at the Khadi and Village Industries Corporation, which is under your ministry and which is
It's
actually... Isn't Khadi under... I'm sorry.
It's under MSME.
Okay,
It's not
sorry.
under me.
But we've seen, if you compare, say, Khadi, in the public sector and the private sector. The private sector has managed to sell products at the same level and marketed them better. Where has the public sector gone wrong? So I'm sure you faced this challenge in the textile industry as well.
See, when a private sector has to take a decision, a policy decision for their enterprise, they don't have to refer to a rule book. Or that officer does not have the sword hanging on their head that मैंने अगर एक extra यहाँ line ली तो कल मेरे खिलाफ inquiry होगी. That is the problem. no officer is going to put his reputation, his peace of mind on the line. That is the honest truth. Every officer has that fear of persecution. And even if it is not an inquiry, then just a hint of an inquiry and a leak to a newspaper or at evening 9 o'clock news and everybody shouting about how dishonest this officer is, every officer says, go by the rule book. And the rule book for the public sector is completely different. The only thing that we can do is become a bridge. For instance, you talk about Khadi. Prime Minister had launched and inaugurated the India Handloom brand. So when I spoke to the private sector, I said, why can't handloom become a everyday use garment? Why should it only be a select form of garmenting? They said we have two challenges. One, availability of cloth. Two, when we have a cloth at our disposal, the color bleeds. If the government can help assure us that these two challenges will not be met, we are more than happy to work with a weaver. We did that under the India Handloom brand. Now we have 60 organic dyes which do not bleed. And we have ensured that the industry is directly connected with weavers and weaver clusters so that they can directly pick up. One of the successes, Peter England started making handloom shirts with mother of pearl buttons. Alan Solly started making handloom shirts. We had Biba women's wear actually pick up 8 lakh meters of Pochampalli cloth for salwar kameezes.
Wow.
Weavers had never seen big industry coming to them. Industry had never found that quality directly. So the government became an enabler. That is what you can do. The government can give you an enabling environment, connect the two dots, and then whoever is competent enough will survive.
That's an excellent story. Yes, Alok Bansal, back there had a question.
Ma'am, my first question is that employment generation has been a problem during past 3 years. And according to a report, I think the money invested in textile industry creates far more jobs than many other industries. Unfortunately, in India's case, once the textile quotas were wound up, it was hoped that textile industry will boom. But really not many new textile firms have come up because textile industry at different stages create employment, right, from ginning, spinning, weaving, apparel making. In fact, many of the textile firms are still in doldrums. So what is the government doing about it, and how do you think when the new textile firms, the boom would start? I don't think so that's happened till now. And the second related question, which starts from the answer that you give, that DOPT would give an answer or something like that. And I think everybody here would agree that irrespective of the governments that come, the biggest problem of governance in India is that any political decision taken has to be implemented by a bureaucrat who has no stake in the government. So this bureaucratic stranglehold needs to be removed. And I think the first place to start is DOPT. Why should DOPT be manned by a beneficiary, the bureaucrat? Can't we have an HR manager from the corporate world, Mohan Das Pai or somebody, come and man DOPT completely? No stakeholder from the bureaucracy in the DOPT. I think that would be the first way of dismantling the bureaucratic stranglehold of the government.
So I think that, forgive me and pardon me for saying this, but when you say that bureaucracy has no stakes, you forget that they are very much citizens of this country. Hence, to say that everybody is a black sheep would be extremely unproductive. Secondly, let's understand the realities of governance. To say that the fulcrum of Indian bureaucracy should be managed by a private sector, which is actually a beneficiary, that is a real beneficiary, would be an oxymoron. I'm sorry. Because that is where decisions are taken as to how budgets are allocated, how budgets are given out. So that is one challenge which I never envisage private sector controlling DOPT. I mean, there are other people from the services, possibly they would know better, but
They've tried quite a few times to control DOPT. Thank God they couldn't.
My thing, Samir, is only this much. To say only the bureaucrats is the villain is incorrect. To say that they have no stakes, they are very much citizens of this country. And there are bureaucrats who have gone above and beyond the call of their duty and stopped many anomalies in governance. Your second question, and the first one that you spoke about, textile. I think the question in itself, when you talk about textile and everything is doomed, let me give you 2-3 examples of why this doomsday theory is used in textile. Now, between subsidy programs which were given so that capital investment can increase in the textile sector, there came a gap period. It's called the blackout period in textiles. What was the gap period? The gap period was industry was told that subsidy will continue, and till such time subsidy continue, you can continue to take loans from banks and buy new machines. All you have to do is put in your papers to the bank will upload and get the subsidy. The problem was that the banks never uploaded, and hence the industry got stuck. So in the previous government, Mr. Chidambaram, the current president, they were all appealed to by my erstwhile textile minister that here we have a situation where the government verbally assured that capital subsidy will be given. You are not keeping that promise. Loans are mounting up. And now, how do you rescue them? So now you have loans which are mounting up for the past 10 years. Second issue, you talk about this doomsday theory, but if you ask anybody who's genuinely working in textile, what are the numbers? Nobody can tell you. Why? Because in the year 2004, the Textile Commissioner's Office, which was the chief statistics office of the entire industry, was discontinued as statistics office. So this is a sector for which no numbers have been available since 2004. So in the absence of accurate numbers,
Oh my God, how could you plan?
you have been planning since 2004 and now 17. So when I took office, one of the first things we did, I said, everything is an estimate. Can you tell me something specific? They said, Madam, वो तो 2004 में ही हमने बोल दिया था, they can't take any statistics. I said, तो who can? So we reinstituted now the Textiles Commissioner Office as the statistics office. That means the real-time numbers of what happened this year will come next year, sir. Third issue, you talk about doomsday theory about textile. The whole world is moving towards man-made fiber. And your entire textile economy is hugely based on cotton. So there has to be a progressive tilt from cotton to man-made fiber, which will take its own time because tastes of people, needs of people, and the sector will change over a period of time. Where are the good news spots? Today, the handcrafted goods market of India is close to 37,000 crores worth of exports. We are still selling the old story of the poor weaver. We need to sell the legacy of India and the pride that we have in our handcrafted goods to expand that market. Where is the good news? The Prime Minister speaks about the smart cities. Now, for building of smart cities, you need smart textiles. So the canopy that you see at airports, the laying of roads actually can use jute and their life increases by 5 years. This has been established. Those are the new areas. So the story, picture abhi baki hai. Story is not over yet.
Yes, General Chopra, you had a question. A quick question, please. I'll urge the
Don't wanna
questions to
come
be
in the
short
way of
because
dinner.
we have 2-3 more.
My TV watching career started with Kyonke Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi.
Oh my, sir.
Okay, coming on a serious note, you have touched on employment in a very small manner. The director, Sanjoy, he spoke about employment, and I asked this question in the previous session, it wasn't answered. What I know from you is, what is this big that you all are planning? You talk of innovation, Modi government, 3 years, because the figure I keep hearing is 10 million jobs 3 years ago. Today I'm also told 10 million jobs are required. Yes, there's little textile here and there. My view is, we're going to have Ramnath Kovind as the next Rashtrapati, and he's going to be from the Dalits. If you address the Dalits, you will be able to generate a lot of jobs. You must think of ways to do this. Thank you, Minister.
In fact, sir, we started something called the Power Tech Scheme on the 1st of April because the Prime Minister was very keen that we are preponing and ensuring that the entire budget activity is finished by the 31st of March. On the 1st of April, we started the Power Loom Scheme, wherein one of the biggest challenges for Power Loom sector was the cost of electricity. So we gave them a special package for solar energy in which we give subsidy of 50% to entrepreneurs. But if you are from the Dalit community, then our subsidy increases to 75%. And if you're a tribal entrepreneur, then the subsidy given by the government of India is 90%. So the thought that you have right now conveyed is something that we're already working on. The second issue, when you talk about, let's say, weavers, where there is a lot of challenge in terms of their economic well-being, there was a census done in the year 2009-10, in which it was found that out of the entire weaving community and their children, only 1% had ever seen a higher education institute. So when we asked the weavers, why is it that none of your children or family members actually go to a higher education institution, they said, we genuinely have no money. So this year again, we started a program through the National Open School because they can't leave their looms, they need to continue working and studying. So we made sure that through the National Open School and the Open University, now Government of India pays 75% of the fees for the weavers and artisans. So we are there onwards, but like I said, the legacy of problems at least have been humongous, but we are getting there.
So the final audience question from the gentleman there. Yes.
Well, my name is Irfan. I'm working with ORF now, and I'm from Afghanistan.
Yes.
Did you watch the minister on television?
Let me start with something interesting. Every night, like million of Afghan families used to put their dishes aside, shush their children, and start taking a TV to watch your, serial drama. But thanks to the Indian government that now you come to politics and they're not sitting idle.
Indian government didn't get me into politics.
Otherwise they would always keep sitting idle and used to watch your serials.
Okay.
Okay, the thing that I would like to ask, that besides like education, any other infrastructure work that Indian government has done to Afghanistan, so what would be your reaction if Afghan government ask you for cooperation with them in textile, because we are very backward in there, unfortunately.
I think that the legacy you have is extremely beautiful. And how can Tulsi ever say no to Afghanistan?
That's a winning line. When did you discover you were so popular in Afghanistan?
You know, the very weird story behind this is Ekta Kapoor calling me one morning, because I used to work, Ashok, from 9 in the morning till next morning 6 and come back home only for 2-3 hours to sleep. So she woke me up shouting on the phone. I said, what happened? She said, take out the Times of India. I said, what? Because actors are not supposed to read newspapers. She said, take it out right now. There's an article. I said, by who? She said, Shashi Tharoor has written about Tulsi. I said, oh, acha, okay. And look at the irony. So Shashi Tharoor writes about, and it's there in his book, he writes about this alleged robbery that has happened in Afghanistan. And the robbers, because everybody was so busy watching the series, actually wrote on the wall before fleeing with everything, thank you, Tulsi. But I think, and I think the young man can confirm here, the lady who actually did the translation work for me in Afghanistan, she also stood for an election there.
Did she win?
She didn't win, just like that. No, but I'll only say this. The fact that he presumes government got me into politics. The government does not work like that in India. But I think that the fact that I have that kind of a connect, not only in Afghanistan, but somebody told me they were watching, it was the #1 show in Fiji and then Swahili. That gives a lot of solace to those people who genuinely hate me in Indian politics. Because they say, aapko agla chunav ladna hai to Amethi chhodiye Afghanistan jaiye.
No, you should always show them Shashi Tharoor's articles. So
No, I didn't want to get Shashi into trouble. Sorry, Shashi, nobody knows that in the Congress party. I take my words back.
Okay, I have one observation and one question. The observation, Minister, was that I fully expected questions on departments of the government apart from textiles. I just didn't expect so many questions on DOPT. But my final question is something which the lady from Chennai also said. How seriously do politicians take think tanks? Do you think this is just, people just consider us as academic and armchair analysts who sit around at jamborees such as this? This is the Woodstock of think tanks. We're all getting together for a big think tank, sort of think fest here. Do people in politics take us seriously, or do they think we don't know what
I think a politician can segregate between think tanks who genuinely want to contribute and think tanks which have an agenda of their own and presume that politicians don't know otherwise. So I think that those think tanks which have genuinely come with a desire of wanting to effect change, they get support not only from politicians but also citizens, they get support from bureaucracy as well. But since everybody here in Delhi is a majhawa khiladi, they can see the baggage from like
And you,
way far.
and you, of course, speak at platforms of think tanks which do genuinely good work. Sorry.
And here I shall call upon my acting skills. Yes. No, I think that what is essential, irrespective of intention, what is healthy is at least a conversation. A conversation has never harmed anyone. A conversation at least opens you to new ideas, highlights certain ills or certain challenges that possibly you don't see in your day-to-day life, because you're so busy trying to just do what's right or what is just expected and not go beyond that. So conversation like these, in fact, is something that you look forward to, because you go away with new ideas, you and us. Hence to say, madam, nobody reads you? Absolutely not. Somebody's always reading.
Thank you so much, Minister. I'd now like to invite Dr. Sanjay Joshi, Director of ORF, to give closing remarks.
How do I begin thanking the Minister after this very brilliant, candid, open discussion? Ashok began by saying that she's been and she is a great communicator. And the gamut of issues she's covered during this brief conversation with Ashok, spawning just about talking about textiles, talking about employment generation, and then going on to, of course, the whole issue of governance reforms within the Indian bureaucracy. It's been the reach of this conversation, the spread of this conversation that has been most engaging, madam, to this audience which is assembled here. Because many of the things which you've talked about are issues which they are going to be debating, they are going to be cogitating about it as think tanks do. What they produce at the end of that cogitation, I don't know if you find it useful or don't find it useful, but that is the job they all are in. So thank you for being here with us, and you have broken several glass ceilings in your life. I mean, you have been the first lady minister for HRD, then the first lady minister for textiles, and you have your conversation has been so open, frank, soft, and yet blunt, hitting hard. We've loved every minute of it. Thank you so much, ma'am.